The scream came before the footsteps. "Daddy, please stop them." The sound shattered the empty glass corridor of Hartwell Tower, cutting through the midnight rain like a blade. Michael Carter turned just as three men emerged from the stairwell shadows, their movements sharp, coordinated, wrong. Not drunk, not lost. Hunters. His 7-year-old daughter Emily stood frozen near the elevator bench, clutching a frayed stuffed rabbit, her small body trembling as the distance between her and the men vanished in heartbeats. Michael did not shout. He did not hesitate. Thought was too slow for moments like this. His body moved before fear could reach his chest. One step a pivot and elbow, driven with brutal precision into the first man's throat. The impact was surgical final. The second attacker swung wide fast enough to break bone, but Michael slipped inside the arc and dropped him with a single strike to the core. The third reached for a blade. A mistake. Michael caught the wrist twisted until something gave way, then swept the legs. The man hit the marble floor hard and did not rise. 6 seconds. 3 men down. Silence rushed back in, heavy and stunned. Emily ran to him, then crashing into his legs, sobbing, her face buried in his jacket. Michael knelt, wrapping her in his arms, his heart pounding like it wanted out of his chest. "It was over," he told her softly. "Daddy is here." But even as he spoke, his eyes lifted to the blinking red light of the security camera in the corner. He knew what that light meant. Questions, faces, attention. And attention was the one thing he had spent 7 years avoiding. Michael Carter had learned how to disappear. At 38, he looked like a man worn down by night shifts and cheap coffee. Tall, broad-shouldered dark hair, cut short for convenience, not style. His janitor uniform hung loose on a frame built by discipline, not chance. Calloused hands pushed mop carts and trash bins now, but faint scars traced his knuckles and wrists, old signatures of a life he no longer spoke about. To the people who worked in Hartwell Tower, he was invisible. Just another man cleaning offices where decisions worth millions were made by people who never learned his name. That invisibility had been the point. 7 years earlier, Michael had been something else. Part of a government unit so buried in classified files, it officially did not exist. Retrieval operations, they called it, a clean phrase for ugly work. Hostage extractions in places that did not appear on maps. Children pulled from basements while gunfire echoed above. Michael had been good at it. Too good. He could read danger in a room the way other men read weather. He could end a fight before it became one. He could carry someone bleeding and terrified through chaos and never slow down. Then Laura happened. She had laughed, easily believed, stubbornly loved him, as if he were more than a weapon pointed at the world's worst problems. They married quietly. When she became pregnant, Michael promised her he would leave that life behind after one final mission. He meant it. But Laura never heard him keep that promise. Complications during childbirth took her away in a blur of medical terms Michael could never remember. Hemorrhage, cardiac arrest, words that meant nothing compared to the weight of a newborn placed in his shaking arms. In that moment, everything else stopped mattering. Michael vanished from the world that knew his name. No goodbyes, no records. He became a janitor because it required nothing but silence and endurance. The pay was terrible. The hours were long. But it allowed him to work nights and be with Emily during the day. It allowed him to stay close to protect her without dragging danger home. Hartwell Tower was just another building. Glass steel money. He cleaned it after midnight while Emily slept in the employee lounge or did homework under vending machine lights, humming softly to herself. Emily was nothing like him. Where Michael was quiet, she was curious. Where he hid, she reached. She had her mother's light hair and her father's steady gray eyes, eyes that watched the world with cautious wonder. She asked questions Michael did not always know how to answer. Why buildings stood, why birds flew south, why bad people existed at all. He gave her what answers he could, invented the rest, and prayed she would never have to understand the truth. Keeping her innocent was the only mission that mattered now. Across the city, Victoria Reynolds stood alone in her corner office 50 floors above the streets of Chicago, watching rain streak down glass that cost more than Michael's yearly salary. At 35, she ran Hartwell Group with the calm authority of someone who did not allow mistakes. Her tailored suit was armor. Her posture was command. Board members twice her age listened when she spoke because she never wasted words. Control was her religion, and she practiced it daily. It had not always been that way. When Victoria was 14, she had learned what it felt like to be powerless. Taken in the dark, held for days in silence, broken only by footsteps overhead. She remembered the smell of damp concrete, the sound of her own breathing, the certainty that no one was coming. Until someone did. She never saw his face clearly, only felt strong arms lifting her, a calm voice, telling her she was safe. By the time authorities arrived, her rescuer was gone, leaving behind nothing but freedom and questions. She never forgot that feeling. She built her life around never feeling it again. Back in the empty corridor of Hartwell Tower, Michael stood lifting Emily into his arms. He moved quickly, avoiding cameras, stairwells he knew too well. When security arrived, they found 3 unconscious men and no explanation. No janitor, no child. Just questions with no answers. That night, Michael did not sleep. He sat by the apartment window, watching the street below, Emily's small hand wrapped around his finger as she slept fitfully. He knew what he had seen in those men. Professionals. And professionals were never sent by accident. By morning, the rain had stopped. And outside their crumbling apartment building, a line of black government vehicles rolled to a halt, engines humming softly, announcing that the past Michael had buried was done staying buried. Morning did not bring relief. It brought engines. Michael Carter noticed the sound before he saw anything. A low, disciplined hum that did not belong on a broken Chicago side street. He pulled the thin curtain aside and froze. 5 black SUVs were parked with military precision, their dark windows reflecting rusted fire escapes and peeling paint. Men in tactical vests moved calmly, setting a perimeter, as if this street were a classified location, not a forgotten neighborhood. The past he had buried was standing outside his door. Emily sat at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs as she ate cereal, unaware of what those engines meant. Michael forced his breathing to stay even. Panic was useless. Panic attracted mistakes. He had survived worse situations by remembering one rule: stay calm, stay invisible. He stepped back from the window, poured coffee with steady hands, and prayed the knock would not come. It came anyway. Firm, controlled, professional. Emily looked up, eyes wide. Daddy Michael put a finger to his lips, crossed the room, and opened the door. Victoria Reynolds stood in the narrow hallway like a force of nature carefully restrained. Her red dress was elegant, deliberate, entirely wrong for a building that smelled of dust and old paint. Sunglasses hid her eyes, but her posture spoke of command. 2 men waited on the landing below, but she had come up alone. That choice told Michael more than any badge ever could. "Mr. Carter," she said, "we need to talk." Her voice was calm, but there was tension underneath, tightly wound and dangerous. Michael stepped aside without protest. Resistance would only escalate what had already reached his doorstep. Emily peeked from behind his leg, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Victoria's gaze flicked to the child, softened for half a heartbeat, then hardened again, as if emotion were something she refused to indulge in. The door closed behind her, sealing 3 lives into a space too small for secrets. "About last night," Michael said evenly. Victoria removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, trained to dismantle illusions. "So you admit it was you?" "I admit I protected my daughter from 3 men who had no business being near her." Silence stretched between them. Victoria noticed everything. The way Michael stood without tension, balanced and ready. The scars on his knuckles. The absence of fear in his voice. This was not a man reacting. This was a man remembering. "No ordinary janitor takes down trained operatives in seconds," she said. Michael met her gaze without blinking. "No ordinary CEO brings government security to a janitor's apartment." Emily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, who's the fancy lady?" The question slipped past defenses no strategy could block. Victoria knelt slowly, lowering herself to Emily's eye level. "I'm Victoria. I work in the building where your daddy works. He did something very brave last night." Emily considered this, then nodded seriously. "He's always brave." Victoria stood something unsettled, flickering behind her control. "May I sit?" Michael gestured toward the worn couch. She sat, her tailored coat brushing against fabric that had been mended too many times. When the door clicked shut, the world outside disappeared. No cameras, no guards, only truth waiting. "I have been followed for 3 months," Victoria said. "Professional surveillance. Someone breached my security network. At first, my team thought it was corporate espionage. Then we noticed patterns. Faces repeating. Vehicles that lingered too long. Last week, my head of security showed me footage of 3 men conducting reconnaissance inside Hartwell Tower." She paused, letting the weight of it land. "The same 3 men who approached your daughter last night." The room felt colder. Michael kept his voice steady. "They weren't after her." "No," Victoria agreed. "They were after me. I changed my schedule at the last minute. They needed leverage. Your daughter was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the right place, depending on who you ask." Michael's jaw tightened. 3 men came within arm's reach of his child. Corporate language did not soften that reality. "I don't care why they were there," he said. "I care that they were." "Then we share the same priority," Victoria replied. She studied him again, deeper now. "My security ran your background. Your employment history begins 7 years ago. Before that, nothing. No education records, no addresses, no digital footprint. You don't exist." "I exist just fine," Michael said. "I clean floors. I raise my daughter." "No," she said quietly. "You became a janitor. There's a difference." Emily wandered to the window, pressing her nose against the glass, fascinated by the black vehicles below. Michael watched her, something fierce and protective tightening in his chest. "Whoever sent those men knows you stopped them," Victoria continued. "They know you are not what you appear to be. That makes you a liability and an asset." "I am neither," Michael said. "I am a father." Victoria leaned forward. "People like the ones coming for me don't stop. They escalate. And now they know your face." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Michael thought of the camera in the hallway, of the speed with which things had unfolded. He had broken the first rule of survival, never draw attention. But he would make the same choice again, without hesitation. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Protection. For both of us. My security can handle controlled environments. You handle chaos. Michael stood. I left that life behind for a reason. Victoria rose as well. And do you really believe it left you behind? A beat passed. Emily turned back, sensing the tension. Are we in trouble? She asked softly. Michael knelt, meeting her eyes. No, sweetheart. Everything's going to be fine. Victoria watched them, something shifting inside her. She reached into her coat and placed a card on the table. That number reaches me directly. Day or night. When they come back, and they will, don't hesitate. She turned and left without another word. 15 minutes later, the motorcade was gone, and the street returning to its usual silence. But the silence felt different now. Thinner. Fragile. That night, Michael did not sleep. He sat by the window in the dark, watching the street, listening for sounds that did not belong. At 2 a.m, he heard it. A faint mechanical whir outside the glass. A drone, small and expensive, its lens catching the streetlight. Michael moved without thinking. The window opened. A broom handle flew. The drone spiraled into the alley below. By the time he reached the street, it was gone. Someone had already retrieved it. His phone vibrated. A message from Victoria. They're watching. Michael typed back. I know. Her response came instantly. Pack a bag. My team is on the way. Michael stared at the screen, then at Emily sleeping on the couch. Not yet, he typed. Running tells them we're scared. The pause before her reply was longer this time. Then fine. My team is 2 blocks away. 90 seconds if needed. Michael set the phone down and returned to the window. He understood something now. The life he had buried was knocking again, louder each time. And this time, it had found his daughter. Michael did not run. He stayed because running taught predators exactly where fear lived. He stayed because Emily slept better when she believed monsters only existed in stories. And he stayed because some doors once knocked on did not close again, no matter how quietly you pretended to live. That night, he watched the street until dawn, every sound catalogued, every shadow measured. When the sun finally rose, it brought no peace, only clarity. By mid-morning, Michael walked Emily to school, as if nothing had changed. He held her hand a little tighter than usual. She talked about spelling tests and a drawing she wanted to finish, her voice light, untouched by the danger circling them. Michael nodded, smiled, answered where required, while his eyes tracked reflections in windows and cars that slowed too long. The world looked the same. It never truly was. After dropping her off, Michael did something he had not done in years. He went to work early. Hartwell Tower stood gleaming against the Chicago skyline glass and steel reflecting power without apology. Inside, Michael blended back into the rhythm of invisibility. Mop, bucket, trash. Executives passed him without seeing his face. That had always been the advantage. People did not fear what they did not notice. People underestimated what wore gray uniforms and kept its head down. Victoria Reynolds noticed. She watched him from the glass wall of her office as he crossed the executive floor movements, efficient, controlled, nothing wasted. No hesitation. No distraction. Her security chief stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. That is not a janitor, he said quietly. No, Victoria replied. That is a man who has survived things most people never imagine. She had spent the night reviewing footage. Every angle. Every second of the hallway encounter. She slowed it frame by frame. Michael's reactions were not instinctive panic. They were trained responses. Clean. Measured. Designed to end threats, not start fights. He did not chase. He neutralized. He shielded his daughter with his body without ever looking away from the attackers. That detail mattered more than the rest. Victoria remembered another hallway, another kind of darkness, another man who moved the same way. At 14, she had learned how silence could scream. She had counted breaths in the dark, convinced no one was coming. When he did, she remembered his voice more than his face. Calm, certain, as if fear were something that could be set aside by choice. "You are safe now," he had said. She had believed him instantly. She had built her life chasing that feeling ever since. Michael felt her eyes on him as he worked. He did not look up. Recognition was a form of exposure. Exposure led to questions. Questions led to consequences. At noon, his phone vibrated. A message from Victoria. "We need to talk. My office. Now." Michael stared at the screen for a long moment. He thought of Emily at school, of the drone, of the men who had not been amateurs. Then he wiped his hands on his uniform and replied, 5 minutes. When he entered Victoria's office, the space felt deliberately stripped of comfort. Clean lines, cold surfaces, a room designed to dominate anyone who stepped inside. Victoria dismissed her security with a glance. The door closed softly, sealing them in again. "Sit," she said. Michael remained standing. "Say what you need to say." Victoria did not bristle. She respected boundaries drawn with confidence. "Fine. My security traced the men from last night. Private contractors, Eastern European, expensive. Whoever hired them has resources and patience. This was not a message. It was a test." Michael said nothing. "They wanted to see how fast you moved," she continued. "How far you would go. And now they know." She paused. "They know you exist. Michael's jaw tightened. They already knew. That surprised her. "Explain." "I have spent 7 years making myself invisible," he said. "That only works until someone decides to look hard enough. Last night accelerated a timeline that was already moving. Victoria studied him." "Then tell me why." Michael finally met her eyes. "Because they think leverage still works on men like me. Because they think children are weaknesses." He exhaled slowly. "That is where they are wrong." For the first time, Victoria leaned back. There it was. Not denial, not fear. Acceptance. "You know who sent them?" she said. Michael hesitated. This was the edge he had avoided for years. Names pulled attention. Attention pulled history. But the past was no longer content to stay buried. "I know the type," he said carefully. "I am still confirming the name." Victoria nodded once. "My team found something else. One of the men carried a marker, a tracer used to tag assets." She watched his reaction closely. It is not meant for objects. It is meant for people. The air shifted. Michael's calm cracked just slightly. "How long ago?" "Within the last 24 hours. "Emily." Victoria saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke. "They marked my daughter." Silence fell hard between them. This was no longer corporate risk. This was war by other means. "We can move her," Victoria said. "Private housing, full protection." "No," Michael replied instantly. "That is what they want. Movement creates patterns. Patterns create opportunity." "You are saying you want to use her as bait," Victoria said, incredulous. "I am saying I will not teach my child to live." "Afraid," Michael said. "And I will not let them control the board by threatening what I love." Victoria stood. "You are not thinking clearly. I am thinking the clearest I ever have." She stopped pacing, looked at him fully. "You do not get to make unilateral decisions when my life is also in danger." Michael's voice remained steady. "Your life has security layers, lawyers, distance. Mine has me." That should have angered her. Instead, it grounded her. She recognized that certainty, the kind born from having already lost everything once. "You are asking me to trust you," she said. "I am asking you to stop underestimating me." A beat passed, then another. Finally, Victoria nodded. "Fine. But if this escalates, we act together." Michael accepted the compromise with a slight inclination of his head. I would not expect anything less. That afternoon, Michael picked Emily up from school. She ran to him smiling, oblivious to the invisible war tightening around them. "Did you see my drawing?" she asked. "I would never miss it," he replied. As they walked home, Michael felt eyes on them. Not close, not yet. He let them watch. Let them believe they were unseen. That evening, Victoria received confirmation. A name surfaced at the end of a long chain of shell companies and false fronts. Richard Hale, fixer, broker, a man who specialized in delayed revenge, the kind that waited decades until it hurt the most. Victoria stared at the file, her hands slowly curling into fists. She knew that name. Her father had spoken it once years ago, then never again. She looked out over the city lights, understanding settling heavy in her chest. This was not about money. It was not about power. It was personal. And somewhere below, a man who pushed mop carts and told bedtime stories was preparing to finish something that had been left unfinished for 20 years. Victoria Reynolds had not spoken Richard Hale's name out loud in more than 20 years. Seeing it on the screen felt like reopening a wound that had never healed, only buried beneath discipline and success. She dismissed her security chief and stood alone in her office, staring at the city lights far below. Hale was not a man who acted impulsively. If he was moving now, it meant the end of the game had already been chosen. The question was not why. It was how far he was willing to go this time. She remembered being 14, dragged from a car into darkness that smelled of damp concrete and fear. 4 days without light, counting breaths, listening to footsteps above her head. They told her her father would not pay. They told her she was expendable. Terror hollowed her out until it became numbness. Then the door opened, and a man stepped into the dark as if it belonged to him. He spoke calmly, lifted her gently, and carried her away from everything she thought would kill her. She remembered the forest more than the basement, the sound of leaves underfoot, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his arms felt unbreakable. Fear loosened its grip because he told her it was over, and she believed him without question. When official rescue arrived, he was gone. No name, no face, only the certainty that someone had chosen to save her. She spent years trying to forget that moment. She spent her life failing. Life. Across the city, Michael Carter cooked dinner while listening to the building breathe. Pipes groaned. A door slammed somewhere below. Emily sat at the table coloring, humming softly, safe for now. Michael watched her hands move across the page, careful not to let his thoughts show on his face. Richard Hale never rushed. He observed. He tested. He waited until fear ripened. Michael knew that pattern because he had dismantled it once before. Back then, Hale had been a name whispered in briefings, a broker for people who wanted problems erased quietly. Michael's unit had torn apart one of Hale's most valuable operations overseas. A senator's daughter had been taken. The ransom never got paid. The girl went home. Hale lost money influence and reputation in a single night. He promised revenge and disappeared. Most people assumed that meant he was finished. Michael had known it meant the opposite. That night, Michael checked every lock twice and slept in a chair near Emily's bed. He dreamed lightly, waking at every unfamiliar sound. Running was not an option anymore. Hale had already found him, And worse, Hale had seen what Michael valued most. There was no hiding from a man who believed patience was a weapon. Victoria did not sleep either. Her penthouse felt smaller than it ever had despite the space and glass and silence. Control had always been her refuge, and now it felt thin. She poured herself a drink she did not finish and sat in the dark, replaying security footage of Michael in the hallway again and again. The way he moved, the way he shielded his daughter, the way he ended violence without anger. It felt disturbingly familiar, like muscle memory borrowed from her own past. By morning, she made a decision she had avoided for years. She ordered her team to pull classified archives, old ones, files sealed by favors and national security stamps. She called people who owed her. She ignored the warnings about dead ends. If Richard Hale was connected to her past, she needed to see the full shape of it, no matter how ugly it was. The answer came that afternoon. One file surfaced from an operation conducted 20 years earlier. Names were redacted, locations blurred, but the mission description was unmistakable. Hostage retrieval, politically sensitive, foreign soil. One line froze her breath. Extraction successful. Civilian recovered unharmed. Operative departed before handoff. A call sign appeared once in the margin. Ghost. Victoria closed the file with shaking hands. She did not believe in coincidence. She believed in patterns. A janitor with no past. A man who moved like memory. A father who carried his child the same way she had once been carried out of darkness. The shape of the truth finally clicked into place, heavy and undeniable. Michael received her call while walking Emily to school. He answered without speaking, listening first. "We need to talk," Victoria said. "Not at my office. Somewhere public." Michael scanned the street, the parked cars, the man across the way, pretending to scroll on his phone. Public was predictable. Predictable could be managed. Name the place, he said. They sat in a worn diner near the river, steam rising from untouched coffee. Ordinary conversations filled the air around them, unaware of the history folding inward at a corner booth. Victoria spoke quietly, her voice stripped of command. "Richard Hale is recreating something," she said. "He is repeating a pattern." Michael nodded once. He always does. Hale believes pain works best when it echoes. She studied him, searching for denial and finding none. "Then tell me why my past is tangled in yours." Michael watched the reflection in the window, the slow movement of the waitress, the man at the counter who glanced too often. 20 years ago, my team disrupted one of Hale's deals, he said. The hostage was a teenage girl, Senator's daughter. We got her out before payment. Hale never forgave that. Victoria's breath caught, even though she already knew. That girl was me. Michael met her eyes, something quiet passing between them. "I never knew your name," he said. "I never asked. You were just a kid who needed to go home." For a moment, Victoria could not speak. The diner noise faded, replaced by forest air and night sounds. "I have been looking for you for 20 years, she said softly. "You were cleaning my building." Michael looked down. "I did not stay to be found." Silence settled between them, heavy but honest. Then Victoria straightened, resolve hardening again. "Hale marked your daughter," she said. "He is watching, and he will not stop." Michael remained near the window of Victoria's office, watching the city lights smear into long ribbons below, while the steady sound of Emily's breathing filled the room behind him. She slept curled on the couch, unaware that her photograph had been delivered like a threat wrapped in paper. Richard Hale was no longer testing boundaries or sending signals. That single image had been a declaration. He wanted Michael to understand that distance routine and normal life were no longer shields. Victoria stood a few steps away, her arms crossed tightly, as if holding herself together. "My team traced the envelope," she said quietly. "No cameras, no fingerprints, no witnesses. He wanted us to feel how easily he could reach her." Her voice hardened as she continued. "Hale is not warning us anymore. He is committing to an outcome." Michael nodded, once his face unreadable. "That fits his pattern. Pressure creates fear, fear creates movement, and movement creates mistakes." He finally turned toward her. "Hale believes fear weakens people. He believes it makes them predictable. He does not understand what fear does to a man who has already lost everything worth losing." Victoria met his gaze, searching for uncertainty and finding none. "Then tell me what happens next." She did not sound like a CEO in that moment. She sounded like someone who knew the storm was close. "Hale will want escalation," Michael said. "Surveillance is no longer enough for him. He needs proof that he still controls the board. He will aim for something public, something symbolic. An attack on you, on this building, or on me. He never leaves a story unfinished, because unfinished stories make him feel powerless." The truth settled between them, like weight. Victoria had built Hartwell Tower as a monument to control a place where no one could corner her again. Now she understood that power did not make a place untouchable. "My security team sees the same indicators," she said. "Financial movements, equipment purchases, short-term leases near the tower. He is staging for something soon." Michael exhaled slowly. Hale never trusts a single path. He builds redundancies. That means the threat will come through routine access points. Maintenance routes, emergency protocols, places people stop questioning because they feel familiar. He paused, then added, "That is where he will feel safest." Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the implications. "Then nowhere is truly safe." Michael's answer was immediate and calm. "Nowhere ever is. Only defended." He crossed the room and knelt beside Emily, carefully adjusting the blanket at her shoulder. She stirred slightly, murmured something unintelligible, then settled again. Victoria watched the movement closely, noticing how gentle his hands were, how practiced the tenderness looked. This was not a man divided between violence and love. This was a man who carried both with the same discipline. "I will stay here tonight," Michael said quietly as he stood. "Not for comfort, for observation. Hale will be watching how we respond to this. If I am not where he expects me to be, it unsettles him. And when Hale feels unsettled, he rushes." "You think he's watching right now?" Victoria asked. Michael glanced toward the dark glass where their reflections overlapped. "He assumes I will fortify and retreat. He will look for visible security changes, for panic. If we give him stillness instead, he grows impatient. Impatience leads to mistakes. Mistakes are the only things men like Hale cannot tolerate." Victoria nodded slowly, grounding herself in strategy. "Then we prepare for impatience. Quietly." Morning arrived without incident, which unsettled Victoria more than open violence ever could. Hartwell Tower functioned as if nothing had changed. Executives arrived on schedule. Elevators hummed. Meetings began on time. The normalcy was intentional. Beneath it, her security team worked in silence, adjusting access logs, rerouting maintenance schedules, and reviewing emergency protocols without visible reinforcements. Anything obvious would tip Hale off. Michael moved through the building early, his janitor uniform restoring the invisibility people expected from him. He studied blind spots, stairwells, service corridors, and storage rooms. He memorized rhythms, who arrived early, who stayed late, who belonged and who felt slightly wrong. Years of training sharpened every detail. Hartwell Tower was not just a workplace. It was terrain. Victoria watched him through the security feeds, a quiet unease settling in her chest. Power that announced itself was easy to counter. Power that hid behind routine was far more dangerous. Michael blended into the background so completely that even knowing what he was hard to keep him in sight. By midday, confirmation arrived. Hale's shell companies began shifting funds at an accelerated pace. Equipment orders were finalized. Temporary housing contracts were activated near the tower. He was no longer preparing, he was positioning. Victoria called Michael to her office and closed the door behind him. He listened without interrupting, then nodded. "Tonight or tomorrow," he said. "He will want to prove he can still reach us despite precautions. The longer we deny him that satisfaction, the more reckless he becomes." "What happens if he does strike?" Victoria asked. Michael did not hesitate. "We let him believe he is winning. We draw him close enough that he forgets to watch his exits. Hale's greatest weakness is his need to be seen at the end." Victoria stared at him, the weight of the suggestion settling in. "You are talking about bait. I am talking about ending this before Emily learns what fear feels like," Michael replied evenly. "Some costs are unacceptable." That evening, Emily woke with a mild fever, restless and warm. Michael sat with her holding her hand, telling her quiet stories about clever birds and brave animals. His voice was low and steady, a shield made of sound. Victoria watched from across the room, something unfamiliar tightening in her chest. She had been protected like this once. Carried. Shielded. She had never been the one standing between danger and a child. "You do not have to do this alone," she said quietly when Michael joined her again. He met her eyes, understanding something unspoken. "I am not," he said. "But I will finish it." Somewhere in the city, Richard Hale was moving his pieces into place, convinced the game was finally bending in his favor. He did not know that the man he had chased for 2 decades had stopped running. And when Michael Carter stopped pretending to be invisible, the past did not stand a chance of surviving him again. Night settled over Hartwell Tower with an unnatural calm, the kind that made experienced people uneasy. From the outside, the building glowed, as it always did, a confident pillar of glass against the Chicago sky. Inside, however, silence pressed too tightly. Victoria sat in the security control room, eyes fixed on rows of monitors, while Michael stood near the wall, listening not to screens, but to the structure itself. Buildings spoke if you knew how to hear them. Right now, this one sounded wrong. Emily slept on the top floor in a secured executive suite wrapped in blankets, guarded by 2 members of Victoria's personal detail. Michael had inspected the room himself earlier, checking vents' hinges, blind angles. Most people never noticed. He trusted preparation more than promises. Victoria had watched him work, without interrupting, recognizing the precision as something learned under far harsher conditions than corporate risk assessments. Just after 11, the first warning arrived without noise. The constant hum of the security system died abruptly, like a breath cut short. Monitors froze, then went dark one by one. No alarms sounded, no alerts triggered. The control room felt hollow in an instant, as if the building had been hollowed out from the inside. Michael straightened, every muscle tightening at once. "They are here," he said calmly. Emergency lights flickered on bathing corridors in red shadows that stretched and twisted along the walls. Victoria's security chief swore under his breath, fingers flying uselessly over dead controls. This was not a breach. It was an override. Someone had not forced their way in. Someone had walked through the front door with the right codes. Victoria grabbed her radio, her voice sharp but steady. "Get Emily to the panic room now. Full lock. No exceptions." Then she turned to Michael. "How many?" Michael tilted his head slightly, listening past the chaos. "At least 8. 2 teams. Coordinated. Quiet." He reached for the nearest fire extinguisher, testing its weight with a brief, practiced motion. "Not ideal, but sufficient. I will buy you time." Before Victoria could respond, he was already moving. He slipped into the corridor, swallowed by red-lit darkness, his footsteps soundless against the carpet. The building unfolded around him like a familiar map. He could hear them now, boots brushing fabric-controlled breathing, faint radio clicks. Professionals, just like before. The first attacker never saw him. Michael pulled the man into a supply closet, the extinguisher striking hard and fast. Bone met metal with a dull final sound. The second turned too late, catching an elbow that cut off air and thought in the same instant. Michael caught the falling body, easing it to the floor. Silence mattered. Speed mattered more. He lifted the fallen man's radio and slipped the earpiece in. "Clear the west wing," a voice whispered. "Primary target upper floors. Maintain silence." Michael did not smile, but something cold and focused settled into place. They still did not know he was there. The stairwell became his advantage. Narrow, confined, designed for evacuation, not assault. The third attacker rushed him there, knife flashing under red lights. Michael deflected the strike, twisted the wrist until something snapped, and then drove the man into the wall, hard enough to steal his breath. The fourth followed too closely, panic overriding training. A sharp blow to the temple dropped him down the steps without another sound. Michael kept moving. On the control floor, Victoria watched internal trackers blink out one by one, her fingers digging into her palms. She had never seen violence unfold like this before, methodical and restrained, stripped of spectacle. Michael was not fighting. He was dismantling. And that realization frightened her more than chaos ever had. Then the unexpected happened. A window on the 38th floor exploded inward glass, spraying across a dark conference room. A man dropped through on a cable weapon, already raised as he hit the floor. Michael barely had time to turn. The shot grazed his shoulder pane, flaring hot and immediate. He gritted his teeth and closed the distance anyway, slamming a chair into the attacker's chest and driving him back through shattered glass. The cable snapped taut, then went slack. The man was gone. Blood soaked through Michael's sleeve, but he did not slow. Pain was information, nothing more. He reached the upper floors, breathing hard, now knuckles split, shirt stained. Ahead at the end of the corridor, 3 men waited, forming a barrier between him and the secured suite. And standing behind them, calm and composed, as if attending a private meeting, was Richard Hale. Hale looked exactly as Michael remembered. Silver hair, expensive suit, eyes that never stopped measuring. He held a pistol loosely, like an accessory rather than a tool. "Ghost," he said lightly. "I wondered when you would stop hiding." Michael did not answer. He stepped forward. Hale smiled. "I have waited 20 years for this. You cost me everything once. Reputation, influence, millions, all to save a child who would have been forgotten by morning." He gestured toward the door behind him. "And now you are doing it again." "To save a child," Michael said quietly. The 3 mercenaries advanced at Hale's signal. Michael met them head-on, exhaustion burning through him, but resolve holding firm. The first came high, reckless. Michael ducked and drove his shoulder into the man's core, using momentum to throw him into the second. They crashed together, tangled and stunned. The third drew a knife. Michael caught the wrist twisted and ended the threat with a sharp blow that dropped the man instantly. Hale's smile vanished. He raised his pistol and fired. The bullet grazed Michael's side. Michael kept coming. Hale fired again and missed. Then Michael was on him, knocking the weapon away, driving him into the wall. They struggled briefly, Hale trained, but desperate, Michael injured, but relentless. It ended with Hale unconscious on the floor, his empire collapsing into silence around him. The door behind Michael opened. Emily stood there, tears streaking her face. Victoria was right behind her, fear and relief breaking through at last. "Daddy," Emily cried, running to him. Michael caught her with his good arm, holding her close despite the pain. "It is over, sweetheart," he said softly. "It is over now." For the first time that night, the building felt like it could breathe again. Dawn broke slowly over the city, pale light, spilling through hospital windows and washing the night's violence into something quieter and heavier. Michael lay propped against white pillows, stitches pulling at his shoulder, a dull ache settling deep into his ribs. Emily slept in the chair beside him, her small fingers wrapped around his, as if letting go might invite the darkness back. Every time her grip tightened, Michael reminded himself that she was alive, that this was what mattered. The room filled gradually with people who spoke in careful voices and wore serious expressions. Police first, then federal agents, their questions precise and rehearsed. Michael answered what he had to and nothing more. He had spent years learning how to tell the truth without revealing it. Richard Hale was in custody, unconscious, but breathing, facing charges that would keep him far from anyone he could ever hurt again. The mercenaries had been rounded up across the city, safe houses, breached networks collapsed. The machine Hale had built for 20 years was dismantling itself under daylight. Victoria arrived quietly without an escort, her power suit replaced by something softer, almost human. She stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment, taking in the sight of Michael bandaged and exhausted, of Emily sleeping in a chair too big for her. This was the cost, she realized, the part of power no one ever photographed. "You did it," she said softly. "It is over." Michael did not look relieved. "It is finished," he corrected. "There is a difference." Victoria nodded, understanding more than she wanted to. Hale had not been chasing victory. He had been chasing closure. Men like him never cared who paid for it. She looked at Emily, then back at Michael. "You saved her." Again. Michael's mouth tightened slightly. "I did what I should have done 20 years ago. Made sure the threat could not come back." The government representatives came next, polite and efficient, carrying offers disguised as gratitude. Full reinstatement, cleared records, a return to a life Michael had buried for a reason. They spoke of duty and legacy and unfinished service. Michael listened without interrupting, then shook his head once. "My daughter needs a father, not a weapon. I am done being useful to people who disappear when the consequences arrive." They accepted his answer with the quiet disappointment of men who respected him but did not understand him. When they left, the room felt lighter. Victoria stayed. She waited until Emily stirred, blinking awake, confused but calm. "Is it morning?" she asked. "It is," Michael said, smiling despite the pain. "Are the bad men gone?" "Yes, sweetheart. They are gone." Emily considered this, then relaxed back into sleep, satisfied with the answer. Victoria watched the exchange, something loosening inside her chest. She had spent her life building walls because no one had stood between her and fear when it mattered. Watching Michael with his daughter felt like witnessing something she had missed and desperately wanted to protect now that she recognized it. "I have an offer too," Victoria said once Emily was asleep again. Not from gratitude, from logic. Head of security for Hartwell Group. Real authority, real resources. An apartment that does not require watching the street all night, and hours that lets you be there for her. Michael studied her carefully. I do not want charity. It is not charity, Victoria replied. It is payment for services rendered. She paused and then added quietly, and maybe it is repayment for something I never thanked you for. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy with truth. Michael looked down at Emily at the faint bruise on her arm from where fear had tried to reach her. He imagined her growing up without listening for footsteps at night. He imagined a future that was not just survival. She stays in her school, he said finally, and I get weekends. Victoria smiled, small and genuine. Done. 3 months later, the city felt different. Or maybe Michael did. His shoulder had healed. Emily laughed more easily. Hartwell Tower no longer felt like enemy ground, but a place that could be defended without hiding. Victoria learned how to leave her office lights off at night and trust that not every silence meant danger. On a quiet Saturday morning, they walked through a park near the river, autumn sunlight filtering through trees. Michael pushed Emily on the swings, her laughter carrying farther than it ever had before. Victoria sat on a bench nearby her phone, forgotten, watching something that looked dangerously like peace. Emily jumped from the swing and ran to them, proud and breathless. Did you see? I flew. You did, Michael said, catching her easily. Can we get ice cream? She asked, already reaching for both their hands. Victoria laughed softly, surprised by how natural it felt. It is early. Ice cream does not have a time, Emily replied seriously. Michael shrugged. She has a point. They walked together toward the cart, Emily swinging between them, chattering about school and books and a butterfly she had seen that morning. Normal things. Beautiful things. Michael felt Victoria's hand brush his, then rest there. Not a promise. Not yet. Just a beginning. For the first time in 7 years, Michael Carter allowed himself to believe that the future could be more than staying alive. The park breathed quietly in the early afternoon, filled with the soft sounds of leaves shifting and distant traffic that felt far away from anything threatening. Sunlight filtered through tall trees and settled warmly on the benches, turning the moment ordinary in the most precious way. Michael watched Emily run ahead on the path, her laughter ringing without fear, and felt something unfamiliar loosen inside his chest. For years, his body had known only readiness. Now it was learning rest. Victoria walked beside him, slower than she ever allowed herself to be, her steps unmeasured and free of urgency. She wore jeans instead of tailored power dresses, her hair loose, her phone silent in her pocket. The absence of security should have made her tense, but it did not. Standing here, she understood that control had never been the same as safety. For the first time in her adult life, she was simply present. Emily doubled back and grabbed both their hands, swinging between them with exaggerated effort and a triumphant grin. "Can we get ice cream now?" she asked, as if the idea had just occurred to her. "It is still morning," Victoria replied automatically, then paused, hearing how empty the rule sounded. "Ice cream does not have a time," Emily insisted with perfect certainty. Michael smiled, a real one, the kind that reached his eyes. "She makes a strong case." Victoria laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. "All right," she said. "Strawberry or vanilla?" "Chocolate," Michael added, earning a solemn nod from Emily. They sat on a bench with their cones, the sun warming their faces while the city hummed quietly beyond the trees. Emily talked nonstop, telling them about a friend at school, a book she liked, and a bird she had seen that morning. Michael listened to every word, not because the stories mattered, but because she did. Victoria listened, too, realizing how little space she had ever made for moments that served no purpose beyond joy. After a while, Emily grew thoughtful. She finished her ice cream and looked up at Michael, suddenly serious. "Daddy, we are safe now, right? The bad men are gone." Michael's throat tightened. Promises had always been dangerous, but this one mattered. He squeezed her hand gently. "We are safe," he said. "I promise." Emily considered this carefully, then nodded, satisfied. "I like it here," she said. "I like our new home. I like Victoria." She hesitated, thinking hard. "Do you think Mommy would like it too?" The question hung softly between them. Michael felt the ache rise sharp but manageable. He looked at Victoria, whose eyes shone with unshed tears. "Yes, baby," he said quietly. "I think she would love it. She would be proud of you." Emily smiled, comforted, and ran off again, chasing something only she could see. Michael watched her heart heavy and full all at once. For years, survival had been his only goal. Keep breathing, keep hiding, keep the past buried. He had never allowed himself to imagine happiness as something lasting. "Thank you," Victoria said softly, "for trusting me, for letting me be part of this." Michael shook his head. "You gave us a chance," he replied. "That matters more than anything." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of life continuing around them. When Victoria's hand brushed his, he did not pull away. He let it stay natural and unforced. It was not a promise. Not yet. Just the beginning of something built slowly with care. For the first time since Laura died, Michael allowed himself to imagine a future shaped by more than vigilance. A future where Emily measured her days by school projects and friendships instead of shadows. He had been a weapon once. He did not have to be one again. Victoria watched Emily return, cheeks flushed with joy, and felt something settle inside her for good. Power had never saved her. Money had never protected her. What saved her was presence. A man who chose people over systems. A child who trusted without knowing why. Emily slipped her hands back into theirs, smiling. Michael looked at her, then at Victoria, and felt peace take root where tension once lived. The past had tried to destroy them. It had failed. Stories like this resonate because they touch a truth. Experts in psychology and human behavior often emphasize real strength is not found in power, wealth, or titles, but in responsibility and presence. A man who chose to disappear from the world did not lose his value. He refined it. When the moment came, his past did not define him, but his love did. Trauma does not vanish simply because time passes. It transforms, and what determines the outcome is whether fear is allowed to rule or whether purpose takes its place. Protection in its deepest form is not about violence. It is about choosing to stand when walking away would be easier. If this story moved, you take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue bringing you powerful stories about courage, family, and hidden strength. And before you go, leave a comment with a short phrase that captures what stayed with you most. 3 words are enough. Try something like "stay strong, chosen family," or "quiet courage."